Hey, welcome to Pat's Soundbytes IGTV. Keeping new music alive is what I do on the radio and now on video. Conducting live chats with the artists and learning the stories behind their latest release and also playing their new video. A special thank you to my friend Chip Ruggieri for scheduling and coordinating today's guest. Chipster PR and Consulting Incorporated is a highly sought-after, internationally renowned publicity, marketing, and consulting firm in the music industry. For more information, you could email Chip at info@chipsterpr.com or you can call at 484-932-8951. Special thanks today to my sponsor, Go-Go Tuners. For all guitar players looking for a focus on ease of use, readability, durability, and accuracy, look no further. The Go-Go Tuner is the choice of many touring professionals and a favorite of casual players. Go-Go's signature green you're in and red you're out screen makes tuning quick and easy. For more information, go to the website at gogotuners.com. Special thanks to WBXO Classic Rock Radio Redefine, allowing me to keep new music alive on the radio airways on the Pat Show every Sunday from 5 to 8 Eastern Standard Time. Only on WBXO Classic Rock Redefined. And a big thank you to Mr. Evan Balzer for allowing me to use his amazing instrumental that you're hearing right now. It's called Trails. To find out more incredible music by Evan, go to his website at evanbalzer.com. And my special guest today is legendary concert promoter Danny Zelisko. And Danny's got a book out called All Excess. And it's a great read, great stories, wonderful pictures, and a must-have if you're a music lover. We talked to Danny about the book, his career, and a lot more right here on Pat's Soundbytes IGTV. Hey, live on Pat's Soundbytes IGTV, keeping new music alive on the radio and video. And of course, I always share great musical content. Well, he might not be a singer, a songwriter, or a full-time rock star, but he is a rock star, a behind-the-scenes rock star. This guy is a legend. I tell you, legendary concert promoter and now author of this great book that you definitely need to buy. Danny Zelisko, how are you, Danny?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm excited. I couldn't put the book down. If you're a music lover, if you're in the industry, you got to buy this, and we'll share that where you can buy it. And I know Danny would autograph it as he did mine here and what have you. Such an honor to have you on the show, Danny. Killer book, easy read, love the pictures, very informative. I learned so much more about the industry. I guess I know you've probably been asked a million times, so let me just start off by who inspired you to say, Danny, you got to put this in writing. You got to share these stories. And what made you go, okay, let's do this?
You know, some years ago, as these stories were rolling in since the 70s and the 80s and into the 90s, and, a lot of really cool stuff happened, a lot of great shows with a lot of really great people. And people have always suggested, when they hear about some story that's taken place or some event, and it's like, you really ought to write a book. And everybody says that. I've said it before. And, I'm going, when am I going to stop and do something like that? So I just found an email from 2011, and I don't remember who I wrote it to, but it had 30 chapters that ended up in the book. And I didn't know how to write. I didn't, a book, that is. I mean, I'm a pretty good writer. I've been writing letters and things, begging people to play for me for years. When we're doing concerts and everything, but to finally put everything into words, I had to start with, okay, what stories do I know? What stories have I told? more than once that I could repeat. And like I write a sentence just to trigger that memory. So I had 30 of them that turned into chapters. Then I had to convince myself, you don't really need to write this in order. Write the stories, the best ones that you have, and then you can edit the direction of how they flow later, which is what I ended up doing. So I ended up with 60 chapters. The other part that was the hardest thing to determine about finishing the book was with all the pictures that I have available to me that have never been seen before. How do I put those in the book? And there were so many I couldn't see doing, like, a lot of books, they have photo chapters,
Right.
and they'll have 6, 8, 10 pages of both sides, nice paper, and then otherwise the rest of the words are on crummy paper. But I wanted my pictures in the story itself so that when you're reading it, it truly is an easy read. Because anymore, let's face it, when you're on Facebook or you're on Twitter or Instagram, you see 2 or 3 words and you're on to the next one.
Exactly.
And you're on to the next one. I didn't want that to happen with this book. I wanted people not to have to flip back and forth between pictures and text. So that was a very expensive decision on my part. It cost me $5 a book more to do it that way, because the reason that people make books the way they make them is because it's more economic to do those photo sections and then just write. And that wasn't the way I wanted my book. I hated them when they were textbooks in school, and I've always hated reading books like that. So I wrote the book the way I wanted to do it. And after all these years, I mean, basically it was just a matter of getting it all down in order.
Congratulations, dude. You are my hero. The minute I opened it and I saw sports memorabilia, and I still got my baseball cards and my programs and my 1970 Yankee yearbook and autograph balls and ticket stubs up to yin yang. My wife calls me a hoarder, but it's something you grab, you leave a show, you go somewhere. I mean, I was always a sports guy, and I'm an hour and a half from New York City, but I grew up in the Bronx, 20 minutes from Yankee Stadium. You're a little bit older than me. I'm born in the 60s, but I love all that. And when reading your story about going to Wrigley, and I was able to go to Wrigley, and I was able to go to the White Sox. I've been to Chicago a bunch of times for work. And man, a break, I'm on that train. I'm going to every baseball stadium everywhere, man. And it was, I couldn't stop. I couldn't put the book down. And you shared so much. I'm a nobody in the music business. And my brother keeps telling me, every time I meet somebody, even Alice or anybody, there's always a story. And, I'm not Howard Stearns, I'm not Eddie Trunk, but I've got to meet and hang out with Billy Gibbons and Alice and everybody. But there's always a connection. Like, there's always something screwy that happens, or they lose your ticket, and he goes, you got to write this down. So you are my inspiration that I need to complete it. And I got the pictures, and maybe somebody will be interested to buy it, but you share so much information about the business and the late great Billy Graham and back in the 60s and the 70s. Danny, let me ask you if you don't mind explaining the process on how it works for our listeners to book a band. We take it for granted as a fan. You go get the tickets, you're there, you get a beer. I'm like rocking and rolling. Not listening to anybody. I'm there for the show. But from the behind the scenes side, can you explain how that all works, and then the role of you? I mean, great organizer, multitasker, budget, numbers, in charge of everything, probably except for the merch. So I'll let you take it from there.
Well, basically, you need to have a band that you want to promote. So let's say you're Joe Regular guy, and you hear of a new band, or maybe there's a band playing in your town that's a great local band, and they're ready to go to the next city 100 miles away. In my case, like if I'm in Phoenix, there's Tucson, it's 100 miles away. Flagstaff's 140 miles. Prescott's about 100 miles. And you've got to be willing to do everything to sell a ticket to a show as a promoter. You've got to arrange for the band to be available that night. You need a hall that has proper equipment. and it's got to be kind of the kind of place where people who would go see that band would go see. So you got to arrange an agreement with the band for how much they're going to play for, how much are you going to pay them. You got to pay the building to use their building. You've got to pay for all the staff, the security and the stagehands and somebody to run the show. You got to pay for all the promotion that you hear on the radio, that you see online, that you see flyers or a newspaper article or you got to pay for all this stuff.
The rider, right? The rider, transportation from the airport.
Well, sometimes, it all depends on what you agree to doing. But with smaller bands, the shows are going to cost less to do, but you're also not going to be able to charge a big ticket price. Right. So, for example, a normal band, when they first come out, the first time I did Pat Benatar, she was $750.
Wow.
Okay? So so was Nirvana. Nirvana was $750 the first time I did them. So you've got to have a good enough room for them. It was the same room. It was a 750 seater called Dooley's. And so the whole place is already there. All you got to do is add their equipment and add a staff to run the show. And you have a concert, but there's a lot of stuff that leads up to that. There's phone calls you got to make sure that they're anticipated and whatever their needs are going to be there. And part of that, you mentioned the rider. The rider's the thing that they make up to try to help you put together a good show day together so that you understand what they're like before they get there and what they need. So if you follow that rider and you have somebody who can read and speak English, whether it's you or somebody who works for you that takes care of the technical end of things, they have a person like that too in their camp. The band does, and they get everything together. It's like, I don't talk to Pat Benatar. Somebody talks to Pat Benatar's person, about what's going to happen. You don't talk to the stars until the show comes up usually, unless, afterwards, them and you stay in touch. That's another story. But the bottom line, the promoter is the guy who's responsible for making sure that band appears at 8:00 or whatever it says on your ticket. And there's about 1 million moves behind that done by qualified people to make sure those people get their show.
And I want to make it clear what you've been doing this for 40, 50 years. Back in the day, there's no internet, there's no cell phone, there's none of that today compared to what promoters have today of access with all the social media. It
was crazy. It was crazy before because, in order to make a deal, you've got to talk to their booking agent about how much the show is going to cost to produce and how much you're going to even charge for tickets, because you all have to agree on that, because it'll be a reflection on the promoter as well as the band when you decide how much the ticket price is going to be. And that's simply an instrument of how much does the band need to make. If the band needs to make $100,000, obviously it's going to make those ticket prices go up higher. If the band's willing to say, which never happens, by the way, if the band's willing to say, we just want to charge $20 for tickets. Okay, then you got to add up all the expenses of how much that show's going to cost and see how much is left over to pay the band. And most times they go, I can't play for that. And then they come up with a bigger number. So, it really depends on a lot of things. How famous are they? Are they popular right now or not? Have they hit a low spot, as bands do in their careers? How many people are going to come? That's your job as a local promoter, is to have that figured out. Like, how popular is this band? What is the right room? Where do they want to go see them? What time are you going to start the show? All that stuff has to go into the mixer to figure out how you end up with a concert ticket that says Pat Benatar 8:00.
And I guess a great challenge is Pat Benatar, Nirvana. Maybe nobody even knows. Maybe they got a little airplay that you got to sell it to get people to fill the seats, which is like,
well, like in those what happened with those two bands was because they have booking agents that are quite formidable in their own right. And I've bought other shows from them before. So then that booking agent comes up with a new band and they go to their usual promoters and they say, hey, do Nirvana. And I go, who the hell's Nirvana?
Exactly.
And he goes, and I swear to God, the agent, Don Muller, he says to me, they're like the crunchy Beatles.
What?
And I said, that was his description. He goes, they're melodic, but they're super heavy and they'll crush your face.
No, they never used the word grunge. Huh?
Well, he didn't want to use that word.
Okay.
And he didn't. So, and that was, I think, was even before that word came out. I don't know.
I don't even know what it was.
But the fact of the matter was, he goes, they have a brand new album that's going to drop. It's going to be huge. Trust me. And it's like, for $750, I trust you. So, and we charge $5.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So think about it. $5 times 750 capacity. That's $3,750. Nirvana took $750 of it. There's also tax. Take a few hundred away from that. I end up with a couple of grand to pay all my expenses, and whatever's left over is mine. So on that show, maybe I made $500 or $700 like Nirvana did, which isn't very much, but who cares? I got to work with a great new band, and we did a great job with them, and they'll come around next year, and then we'll play a bigger place, and then you can actually make some money. But that's called paying your dues. They and me, we both pay our dues together.
And the stress that nobody sees behind it. Are they on time? Where are they?
What's stress?
Like when the Guns N' Roses, when you wrote about Axl and Slash, I'm like, oh my goodness. And I don't want to share that because I want people to buy the book and read this story. I never knew. I forgot what artist. I want to say maybe it was my good friend Paul Nelson, who was Johnny Winter's right-hand guitar player. I think Paul shared with me. I'm like, why are you going from Philly back to New York, and I never knew the 80-mile radius taken away from different vendors or venues so you don't take away their tickets. And I never knew that as a fan. I'm like, why go to Boston, but then back to Virginia and then back to New Hampshire? Like, it didn't make any sense to me, but I learned about that.
You see also, I mean, bottom line is you don't want to like encroach on somebody else's date. So, like for instance, I talk in Arizona terms because I know about that. If you can play Phoenix, Tucson, Flagstaff. Those are all 100 miles or more apart. But when you get into things like I can't do Phoenix and Mesa, that's 20 miles. It's a different city. But the fact of the matter is when the agents book tours, they look at the map and they got to start somewhere. And the band says, well, we live in New York. Let's start there. So you want to do everything within 100, 200 miles when it's possible. But when you get out to the West Coast, you have 300 to 500 miles between a lot of the cities that they're going to play. So there's a lot of times where there's either going to be days off or they got to have a big drive after the show. So ideally, you're routing the tour based on somewhat of a straight line. There's some times, though, where it might go Boston, Cleveland, New York, Rhode Island, Philly, and either the agent's deaf, dumb, and blind, or more likely is that they also, the various buildings that these bands play at are often in demand, and you have to call every one of those buildings and say, I want to tour in November. You got to call every one of those buildings and ask them what dates are available in November. Then you got to put a hold on it so nobody else takes it. And then you got to finish making deals and get back to them to confirm the date. It's all, it's a process, just like anything.
But looking at today, like I think, things are starting to open up a little bit more. Could you imagine in the fall of all the bands and booking agents and promoters trying to get venue? There's going to be so many live shows. I hope that it's going to be so much a competition of who's getting what.
You see, the whole time though, that's not true.
Okay.
Because all this time since last March of 2020, all I've been doing, all the people in my office have been doing is when we get too close to a gig, like within a month, and we realize, well, that show's not going to play, then they have to take not only my date, but any other dates they have booked, because they have to be close to each other and they have to take that whole month and move it to another month.
Okay.
So one by one, we got to go find the availabilities for that building again and place a new date on it and cancel the old date, tell people to keep their tickets for the new date. I've done that 4 times with people already.
Wow.
It's kind of insane. But the great thing is the fans who bought the tickets, at least 75% of them in every case have held on to their tickets waiting for the show to happen. And I love them for that. I mean, when we all get to see these shows finally, it'll be like we'll have a badge of honor together.
Absolutely.
And we'll have waited this thing out and got to the other side of it. And I think that's as much of a driving force as anything in this.
Absolutely. Danny, who decides on an opening act and how does that work?
Well, a lot of times, the buildings like to have opening acts, because if you have an 8 o'clock show and somebody comes out and plays for 75 minutes, that's really not a big night, is it? So most bands like to have an opener before they go on, to just warm up the audience, let them get settled in their seats. And it's a really good opportunity for me or the community or that band to help break a new band who can't sell tickets on their own. Or you could get a bigger act and help sell more tickets to the show. So generally speaking, it's always the headliner who approves and okays the opening band. Now, when I was a little kid doing this for the first time, I went and hired Journey to open for Mahavishnu Orchestra without asking anybody. So I got Journey for $500 for their first show outside of California in 1974. And I'm all Tarzan about it, and I think it's great. And they call me up and they go, "Hey, kid, is this your first show?" I said, "Why does it show?" And they said, did you really book Journey to open for us? They said, "We love Journey. We love Santana. We got no problem with them. We have 23 pieces on stage. You're not moving one of those things once we set up and putting up another band." He goes, "You're going to put Ainsley Dunbar's drums up? You're going to put Greg Rowley's Hammond B3 up in front of this? No, not happening. Cancel them." So my first show, I had to cancel Journey.
Wow, that's a story to have.
So, well, it's in the book.
Yeah.
And the answer to that question is the headliner. The headliner is the one that decides, do we do 1 set or 2 sets? Do we just go straight through? I mean, you'll notice sometimes bands won't start the show on time because they have no opener. So they'd rather have you go to the bathroom, get your drinks, visit with your friends, do whatever you're doing. And now it's 8:15, 8:30, and we start the show. And that's why that happens.
I learned a lot. You mentioned the ticket prices are up to the band and the whole contract. There's a concert promoter. Are you only limited to Phoenix, Danny? I think you explain it in the book. If an artist says, "No, I want you to book me in New York, in London, Paris, Phoenix," can you do that?
Well,
without stepping on people's toes? Or it's up to the artist and the band, right?
Theoretically, I can book a show anywhere. I mean, look at Live Nation. Look at AEG. I mean, these guys got offices all over the place. You can do whatever you want. In my case, I book a lot of groups, like various bands that I'm friendly with, and we do a lot of business together. Alan Parsons and Gordon Lightfoot and Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, and there's a Jackson Brown. There's a number of groups that I'll go to various markets with that I have nothing to do with. And I'll ask them if I like being with them. I'll say to their agent or their manager or even the act, "Hey, we should do more dates together. We have fun." And they'll say, "Fine, I don't care. Let's do more shows." Generally, you're restricted to within the space of whereabouts that you live. I don't believe in that. I never have. I've always gone to Tucson and Albuquerque and Vegas, around Phoenix. But then with some of these groups, John Prine, for example, I did close to 300 shows with him during our lifetime together, and that's more shows with him than by far than anybody else. We had a great friendship. We worked together great, and I just loved his audience, and I like going out with him. We had fun together. So I can go promote a show with him anywhere. Well, not anymore, unfortunately, but I
Right.
could. So
What a
yeah, so you can go anywhere you want as long as you know what you're doing with it.
I felt a lump in my throat when I was reading that you were selling Evening Star
Yeah.
and how the business evolved, and you mentioned Live Nation and corporate and what transpired. Was there any thought back then, Danny? And obviously it's after the fact, of a couple of big time promoters like yourself getting together and joining forces before this big catastrophe took over the whole, almost every aspect of where we are today.
Well, that's what we did. We sold to a company called SFX
Right.
in the early 2000s, and that was supposed to be all of us guys that ran. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna plug this in real quick. I don't want this thing to die on us.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So little did we know when we sold, oops.
That they were going to sell the Clear Channel or somebody, I remember.
Well, they did. Yeah, we didn't know that when we made the deal. Had I known that, I probably wouldn't have done it. We thought we were just being gathered to make one great big company under one roof, and we were all very excited about working with each other doing that. Then we didn't know it, but the whole time they were going to sell it to Clear Channel. Little did we know that Clear Channel didn't know how to do arithmetic, and they couldn't figure out that when you pay $4 billion for something, you're going to have to pay interest on that loan. And despite the fact that us promoters made hundreds of millions of dollars a year between all of us added up, it wasn't enough to pay their loan.
Right.
So that's when they divested themselves of it to what became Live Nation. I wouldn't refer to it as a catastrophe. It's really more like what happens when something gets popular in this country. For example, there used to be 1 million delicatessens all over this country. Not 1 million, but there are thousands and thousands of them everywhere. All kinds of delis, Jewish delis, Italian delis, American delis. And then they go, wow, look at the business that these people are doing. Why don't we start Circle K and 7-Eleven? So that's what Live Nation did.
No, I get it. I just felt
they're the 7-Eleven of promoting, in that this has become a business that it's not rocket science, but you have to be smart about who you book and when and where and all that stuff. Only they're doing it times 20. I was a part of that for a while, and good luck to them. I don't want anybody to have a bad time, but I like running my own shows, and that's what I always did. Most of the people working at these bigger companies now, most of them have never risked a dime of their own money in their lives, but they have great jobs booking music. I mean, it's a fantastic gig, so good for them. I have no problem with any of them.
I just felt bad. You started from scratch.
But I sold it to them.
No,
they didn't put a gun to my head.
Yeah, no, I get that. But you had the good, the bad, the ugly, and I get that. I just felt. I mean, I don't know. I just was attached to reading it, and I'm like, man, here he is I don't want to say the crossroads, but you sold it to him, and you made that decision. You promoted thousands of shows. Is there a band that is still active today from the 70s? And I'm just going to use like ZZ Top as an example that you never had the opportunity to work with and wish you did.
I wish I'd done Dusty Springfield.
Okay. Wow.
I loved her. There's not, I've been asked this before, and I always have a hard time when I'm on the spot to think of who haven't I done, but I can't think of, I mean, say 10 names and I've done them. I
I
mean,
know. I'm reading
you
the
know,
book and looking at the pictures.
it just happens. There's very few people. I never met John Lennon. I never got to do a show with him. I would have loved to have done that. I wish the Dave Clark 5 toured. I would have loved to have
I
them.
got that album. That the name of the game is You Like It Like That.
I love them, you know, and but you know, I've done my Pauls and Ringos and U2s and Stones and all those great bands in various different places. I think the most fun is about having done these bands when they're club acts and nobody knew really who they were except for the people who were really into it. And those early shows like that, or you know, like I mentioned, Nirvana and that Jane's Addiction and Alanis Morissette, for example, were among a very, very few type of groups that I had that were so hot when they came out that we rebooked them the same year, and then the same year rebooked them into an arena. So we go from 700,
Wow.
500 or 700 to 5,000 to 15,000, all in one year. I mean, when groups hit it and it catches on, it's like there's an unquenchable thirst out there in show, you know, for the fans, and they just can't get enough of it. And if these groups are willing to tour and really kick ass doing it, you know, they'll play to some really great audiences.
10 years from now, Danny, where do you see the music business at? I mean, when they're talking about no more tickets, they're talking about apps, show your phone. They're talking about, I talked to a gentleman who is creating a thumb drive. So when you leave a live show, they give you the exact recording of the show you've just seen and heard. Where do you see it going?
Well, that I've never heard that one before. I mean, we've kind of already had that technology, but just to press your finger down on it, well, that's a nice touch. I like having recordings of shows that I've been to. Where I see it going is, regardless, the band still got to get paid. People still got to show up. What might change is how you acquire your tickets or how you gain entry. But bottom line, it's going to, as far as I'm concerned, it'll be the same kind of, you know, ritual that you commonly go through. I mean, what everybody's missing today, the kids today, what they're really missing is lining up a couple of days early outside of some store, right? And having that party on the sidewalk and having your friends show up, and you make sure everybody around you knows, all right, I'm doing a shift right now for 6 hours. Somebody else is going to come, but they're going to be my place in line. And you got to explain all this stuff. And you have yourself a party going into buying the tickets. Then you get your tickets and you're crazy and you're happy. And you go to the show and you've ended up meeting half the audience while you're waiting in line to buy tickets. You know, doing stuff online to me is so impersonal. Doing this is fine. I mean, I think it's great. We don't have to travel 5,000 miles to say hello and talk about stuff. But when it comes to concerts, that's one aspect that I miss for the fans. Now, if you've done that once or twice, it's gotten in line like that, you know you don't want to do that all the time.
No.
But sometimes it was fun and it was memorable. And it's a part of your whole memory of that experience of going to see that band. And those, I think those things are fun and important to have. The memories are just like the collectibles we like to pick up at a show and take home with us. That doesn't make you a hoarder. It makes you a collector. I wanted to mention that earlier because I have a ridiculous collection of stuff, thousands and thousands of everything. You name it, I got it. And I'm, you know, I'm getting to the point now where I got to do something with all this stuff. If nobody wants to give me a museum to put it up, and I'm going to have to sell it. And you know what? I don't mind that idea of it because I think there's a lot of stuff that I got that's really, really difficult to get for a normal person to get. And I like sharing that stuff with people, and I wouldn't mind, you know, sparing my family the painful exercise of having to deal with this stuff if I drop dead, you know. So
Well, you know, it's funny you said
keep
that.
this stuff in mind.
No, I hear you, man. Because my wife and I talked to her lawyer, and I go, I got all this stuff. And he goes, get rid of it now because your kids are going to sell it. They have no idea what it's going to be worth. And they got a yacht, they got a brand new BMW, and you're in the ground. So I hear that. You can go buy the book at Danny's website, D as in David, Z as in Zebra, P as in Pat, live.com. Where else, Danny? Is it on Amazon?
It's on Amazon. You could get the Kindle there. And overseas, they get a different version of it. It looks different, but it's the same book. But yeah, Amazon has the Kindle, and the dzplive.com is the best place to pick it up.
Danny, I thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I have. I love to see you at a show and get a picture. You have certainly put your footprint working your butt off in the music industry, and there's a lot of us that had no idea of the work that you have done in the last 40, 50 years. And congratulations to you for doing that. And thank you for doing that and sharing it all on this book, All Access. Yes.
Thanks so much, Pat. It's really great to meet you.
No, it's a pleasure. There he is, Danny Zelisko, right here on Pat Soundbytes IGTV.